Let's talk to Anne Widdecombe. She is, of course, a former Conservative minister. She was Minister for Prisons. She's also a former Brexit Party MEP. Good morning to you, Anne.
Good morning to you.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Look, I met you way back when you were a Tory MP. I was a political journalist. I've looked back in the cuttings, gone through the computers. I can't find any record of this RAC, this reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete, being mentioned at all until basically a year ago. And even then, just at one article, suddenly we find out hundreds and hundreds of our schools, hospitals, council buildings, loads of other buildings have been built with this stuff, and it could all collapse at any time. And our kids are being sent into school today or tomorrow. Who do you think's to blame for that?
Well, I don't think there's anybody in particular to blame. Presumably at the time it was thought to be perfectly safe, otherwise it wouldn't have been used after all. There has been, presumably, I'm presuming now, there has been no earlier sign that it might be urgent. Now, I think this is a case for common sense. If it is clear that in a particular school this is advanced and there could be a problem, then obviously it makes sense and indeed it's compelling to close it. But if simply they have discovered, as years and years ago they discovered it with high alumina cement, I can remember that, if they've suddenly discovered this and they think that it could be a risk and that it might well have reached an age where it is a risk, then there is no point in just a blanket closure. There's an urgent need for individual inspection.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, we absolutely need to get the surveyors in and find out. And Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, has said that most schools that are affected will still be open today, and that's perhaps less of a knee-jerk reaction and a sort of hysteria. But it is extraordinary that this was identified in the 80s, the late 90s. There was a report making it very clear there was a concern over this. But this hasn't been in the public domain as an area of concern. We know there's been concern over asbestos, and the Sunday Times, which has had a campaign on getting asbestos out of a lot of these buildings, pointing out that actually a lot of these school buildings built with RAC, they've also got a layer of asbestos behind. So, of course, if this concrete crumbles and collapses, you've then got a layer of asbestos. We know what a serious risk that is. We know, tens of thousands of people have died as a result of exposure to asbestos. As James Hill said, it's suboptimal. It's not optimal. But how are these things allowed to happen? We are supposed to be a first world country. We build we build some load of public buildings with what we think is a cheap and clever new material. Turns out there's a problem, and then no one does anything about it for 30 years.
Well, first of all, nobody designs a problem in. You rely on science. You rely on what the latest possibilities are. Certainly, your ordinary minister wouldn't be able to second guess a scientist on that. So you don't actually have the early warning. Now, things do gradually become obvious, but then the question is, how serious, how pressing is it? And that's got to be looked at. Now, I agree that if this was identified in the 80s, and presumably they then said, well, there's no immediate problem. Clearly there hasn't been. Yeah. Then I can understand that it was kicked into the long grass. But you would think that if something were identified then, that you'd have a regular review.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Some of it just seems obvious. But let's have a little listen and a watch to what the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, had to say. He was interviewed by Laura Kunzberg on the BBC yesterday when he said that ministers will act on crumbling schools at risk of collapse. Here's what he had to say.
We will spend what it takes to make sure that children can go to school safely, yes. And parents should know that. They should also know that we won't take any risks with their children's safety. So when new information comes to light, however awkward or difficult it is, we will act to make sure their children are safe.
Well, those words sound great, don't they? Very reassuring, Anne Widdecombe, but we've heard from the Treasury sources saying there won't be any extra cash. We've already got cash-strapped schools. We've got people funding has gone down since 2010 in schools. Where's that money going to come from to rebuild school buildings?
Well, that really is only something that the Chancellor can answer. But first of all, the size of the problem's got to be assessed. Secondly, there's a huge amount of waste, not only in education, but across the public sector as a whole. And I'm always in favour of just trying to get money out of your budgets, because that does oblige departments to look at waste. But I think that it is impossible at the moment for anybody to say where the money is going to come from until we actually know.
Well, indeed.
What it's going to cost.
Can I also ask you about an attack ad put out by the Labour Party yesterday? Picture of Rishi Sunak smiling away, and we'll put it up on the screen for those watching on the TVs rather than just on the radio. Do you think your child's school should be safe? Rishi Sunak doesn't. During Rishi Sunak's time as Chancellor, he cut spending on school building by almost half. That's after the Tories and Lib Dems scrapped Labour's Building Schools for the Future programme in 2010. The Tories ignored Labour's warnings time and time again. Now our children are paying the price with crumbling schools. I don't remember all those warnings about this RAC school. You'd think it would have turned up somewhere. But what do you make of an ad saying, do you think your child's school should be safe?
Well, it is, to put it mildly, alarmist, but that, I'm afraid, is something that comes out of modern politics. It is alarmist, it is unnecessary. Its statement that Rishi Sunak doesn't care is actually libelous. Not that there'll be a libel suit. No. It's sad in a way, but I cannot put my hand on my heart and say that if the reverse through, the Tories wouldn't have come out with something similar. I can't say that.
You make a fair point. Let me get to some other big stories that are in the news. We've seen the Channel migrant crossings, with almost 21,000 so far this year. This after the Prime Minister said he was going to stop the boats. More expected this week with warm, calm weather in the Channel. We saw 872 people packed onto 15 dinghies arrive on Saturday alone. That's the highest number this year, although astonishingly not a record for a single day. It's touched 1,000 before. What do you make of his efforts to, in his words, stop the boats?
Well, first of all, you've got to ask what efforts. He's paid France a great deal of money, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and there has been no result for that money at all. But it makes a good headline. We're cooperating with France. Nothing concrete actually follows. He then talks about Rwanda, and we all know that that's got completely mired up in the courts. The problem is that Rishi talks big, but he doesn't deliver. And that doesn't just go for Rishi, it goes for numerous Home Secretaries as well. Now, my view has always been that if you practiced automatic detention of all new asylum seekers, and I'm talking about secure detention, not just hotels where they can wander out and disappear, it would actually be a massive deterrent, because the message that goes out at the moment, this country doesn't practice detention, doesn't have identity cards, it does have a flourishing underground economy, and that is why it's so easy to disappear in this part of the world.
And why people want to come here. You can work without showing an identity card and reasons like that. So even if we did have the Rwanda policy, a couple of hundred people were able to be sent out to Rwanda. I mean, there won't be more than that on current plans. That's still not going to be a deterrent, because the pull factors are still so strong.
The pull factors are strong, but it would be a massive deterrent, actually, because you don't know if you're going to be one of the few hundred that are actually sent out there.
Yeah, but so you get sent back. Yeah, you've got what? You've got 21,000 so far, and 100 of those realistically might be sent. I mean, you've got worse odds getting across on a dinghy alive. I think most migrants would take those odds, wouldn't they?
I'm not so convinced. When you actually see the first plane going with a large number, and by a large number, I mean, scores rather than a couple of dozen. Yeah. When you see the first plane going, that's going to Rwanda. You haven't ended up in Britain. You've ended up in Rwanda. I think that will have a deterrent effect. Whether it is sufficient, Julia, I doubt.
Indeed. I wonder if you think there's a deterrent effect now for shoplifters. We've had Chris Philp, the policing minister, because she used to work in the Home Office, but the policing minister saying basically police have got to investigate and charge for shoplifting crimes, even if it's under the value of £200. We've seen it rise from £100 to £200, where police basically say, we're just not even going to bother because it's a minor crime. It doesn't feel like a minor crime to the shops that are seeing so much of their stock taken, and certainly to their staff, security staff and cashiers, who are facing rising crime and rising violent assaults from customers as well. Do you think that we've got enough deterrent there?
Well, first of all, you've just listed there a whole lot of people badly affected, but the answer is that shoplifting affects us all, because we pay for it. It's included in the price. That's what we pay for shoplifting. Therefore, it is crucial to get on top of it. And there was a time when the police came and they responded to every complaint of crime. And somehow we've now almost take it for granted well, it's not worth calling the police because they're not going to do anything about it. And the only way you'll deter shoplifting is if you believe if you enter a shop to steal, you will be caught. That is the only deterrent.
Okay, and I wonder though, if you think of lots of jobs, people working in supermarkets, security guards and the like, and even a shoplifter, you can't do that from home. You have to actually turn up somewhere. Front page of the Mail today, an interesting story showing council staff now having a tenfold increase in local authority staff being allowed to log in not just from home but from abroad. Back in 2020 it was 73, now it's up to 700 last year. This is from a Freedom of Information request from the Taxpayers Alliance. Should someone be employed on the public purse, not only working from home but actually working from a beach in Thailand?
It entirely depends on that word, working. I mean, I think what we've forgotten is there's employers, and that includes the public sector. Employers have still got all the rights that they ever had to monitor work performance and to take disciplinary action where necessary and where required. They've still got that. Whether you're going into work and whether you're logging in at home and saving commuting time and getting the benefit of family time, or whether you're logging in from somewhere else. I mean, it might be somebody accompanying their husband abroad, but who can still work all day. There is nothing wrong with that per se. What is wrong is the degree of supervision. Now, that is what actually matters. So, I welcome working from home. I don't know that I welcome working from a beach, be sandy and messy, but I do actually welcome working from home, and I'm not prepared to do a blanket condemnation of it.
OK, well, again, really good to talk to you. Anne Widdecombe, former Brexit Party MEP, former, of course, Conservative Prisons Minister as well. 8